All right, welcome into Dog Walk Talk. Let's not waste any time. Jake Roos, we got some big recruiting news this week, and feels like every week we've got a lot of big recruiting news. Georgia misses out on Caleb Downs, and then less than an hour later, picks up a flip from the Nittany Lions. Tell us about Yazeed Haynes.
Yeah, Kirby loves to offset that bad news, doesn't he? He's always got a little something there, and
And he likes to do it at James Franklin's expense.
I wrote in my commit story that I don't think he's going to get an invite to Thanksgiving this year. I don't think James Franklin's going to be having Kirby over at any point. But yeah, Yazeed Haynes, a really talented receiver. Don't let this is one of those situations where you don't let the rankings sort of fool you. I think that he's a raw guy at the wide receiver position, but he has the intangibles that make him special. 4.39 at Penn State's camp earlier this summer. 6'1", a guy who, I think he put down a 10-10 in the broad jump. I mean, he's an athletic freak. He's a specimen in that regard. Is he the most polished receiver that we've seen? No, I wouldn't say that at all. But I think that Georgia feels comfortable about, what he is able to bring from that raw athleticism standpoint. And that's enough to kind of sway their decision and bring this kid into the class. And I think that anytime you can add a kid that fast at a premium position like wideout, you always have to take that opportunity. As we're recording this, it's right after the announcement of Caleb Downs. They did miss out on him, but kind of offset that with the pickup of one of the best safeties in the class in Janelle Aguero last Saturday. A top 50 player, no matter where you look, guy who brings it all, and really was an important guy for Georgia to close on, especially with the feeling that Downs was probably trending toward Alabama. Will Muschamp put in a lot of work on Aguero. Kirby Smart highly involved there. This is a guy they've devoted a lot of time and resources and energy toward when it comes to recruiting. So, I love what this kid brings. Go watch the tape. A big hitter, a guy who's rarely out of position, and a great mentality. I mean, came out afterward and said, look, I want to be the greatest safety that's ever played in red and black. So, Aguero, a huge get for the Bulldogs. And like I said, just one of many in July so far.
You mentioned the safety position getting nailed down there, and Muschamp and Kirby working really hard. What is the approach from a guy like Will Muschamp, Kirby Smart? I mean, they worked together for so long, going back to their days at Valdosta State. When those two guys are in a room with you at that position, it has to be pretty difficult to say no.
Yeah, I mean, the work kind of speaks for itself. Will Muschamp's worked with defensive backs for a long time, played defensive back. Kirby Smart, also a former defensive back himself. Both guys have developed a ton of NFL players in the defensive backfield. So, these are guys who know what they're doing, and kids recognize that. And I think that that's a huge appeal. I think it's a huge win for Georgia to have both of those guys tag team. And like you said, I mean, you're not going to find two guys with much better reputations when it comes to developing defensive players than those guys. And I think that their work has been important, not only in the defensive backfield, but across this defense as a whole. I think Muschamp deserves a lot of credit for what he's done in a number of these recruitments.
Dogs also pick up Kelton Smith, interior offensive lineman, 6'4", 330. That's a big dog. Even bigger dog, Jamal Jarrett, defensive lineman, 6'5", 365. Whoa. That is a lot of dog right there, Jake. And linebacker Troy Bowles as well. I can't remember if we spoke about Troy last time or not, but that's just where Georgia is right now. I mean, so many guys are committing to this 2023 class. It's really skyrocketing at the moment.
Yeah, I think we previewed Troy Bowles probably the last time we spoke, but I think we recorded prior to his commitment. But that's a guy. Listen, I wrote a column on it earlier this week over at DawgsHQ, and I really started to sit back and think about it while I was doing my mock class for Georgia. The work that Glenn Schumann has done in this class rivals pretty much anybody you could point to across the entirety of the nation, positional wise. I think that, to get Raylan Wilson, C.J. Allen, and Troy Bowles, I mean, you're talking about three top 75 players, roughly, or top 100 at worst in the on-3 rankings. And I think that you just don't see that a lot in this era of, NILs, guys switching things up. I mean, Georgia picked out their 3 top targets and landed all 3 at linebacker. So tremendous work. Troy Bowles, a guy that I love, another guy I encourage people to go watch the film on because you can see the instincts that this kid has. It's clear that his father is an NFL head coach. I mean, and you got to love that too. I mean, that's a guy who can be a captain for your defense, that knows the game inside and out, kind of lives and breathes it in a way that many people just aren't able to because they don't have that experience. You mentioned Jamal Jared as well. Another guy like Aguero, where Georgia poured in so heavily for so long. And, really, really like this guy for what he's able to replicate in kind of Jordan Davis fashion. I mean, he's legitimately a huge person. You can go look at pictures of him standing next to Jordan Davis. I remember
couldn't believe it, man. I could not fathom that much human in like one image. And they're both from North Carolina. So Georgia's just getting all of North Carolina's biggest people, it feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Jamal Jarrett is a kid who, has had Georgia sitting well throughout this whole recruitment. So again, another guy that felt important to close on, even more so after Sydir Mitchell chooses Texas. I think that, he's a guy that they believe they can take and develop. I think he's still kind of a bit of a raw prospect. He's got his best football ahead of him in the way that Jordan Davis did. And credit to Jordan Davis for his work with Jamal Jarrett because they hung out a couple times while they were on campus. He had a chance to meet with him. And I remember one of the interviews we did prior to the commitment, he said, Jordan Davis looked me in the eye and said, come here and be great. And I think that was a compelling message, one that stuck with Jarrett pretty heavily throughout this whole process.
Yeah, I mean, when you're Jarrett and you've seen Georgia lay out that blueprint with a guy that looks like you in Jordan Davis, and you've seen how that can help you with your NFL stock, but also help you with your college career, I got to imagine that's pretty tough to turn down as well. Jake, look, I'm looking at Georgia's class right now with the 2023 class. Georgia number 3 now behind Ohio State at number 1 and Notre Dame at number 2. Still no 5 stars in the class yet, a bunch of 4 stars. If you could think, and I'm going to not totally put you on the spot here, I'll help you out with the names, but if you're looking at 5-star guys that could commit to Georgia soon or you expect to commit to Georgia when they do, these guys that haven't decided yet, and I'm talking about James Smith, a 5-star D lineman, apparently picking between Georgia and Bama. Quay, is it Rusaw or Russaw? I don't know
Rusaw,
how to.
Yeah.
Rusaw, Samuel and Pimba. Some of these 5-star guys. If Georgia fans are really getting greedy about nailing that 5-star in this class, who do you feel like is the best bet?
I think that there's probably the 2 guys I would point to would be Rusaw and Impemba. I think that those are the 2 guys that they're really looking at the heaviest and probably the most heavily involved with. Now if you land Rusaw, there's a pretty strong chance that you sway things in terms of the James Smith commitment as well because they are teammates. And while package deals don't always work out at this level, those guys have been pretty clear that they want to play together at the next level and, have mentioned that consistently. So, Alabama's going to be tough for any kid that's in the state of Alabama. I mean, you're not going to have an easy time pulling anybody like that out, but I think Georgia's sitting as well as anybody else next to the Crimson Tide when it comes to Rusaw. And then with Impemba, that's another guy that Georgia has spent a lot of time with. Chadera Uzo-Diribe has really poured in as well and made a great connection with him. Notre Dame's definitely a team to watch out for. He's a Midwest guy playing at IMG, so that'd be a little bit closer to home for him. But the Dogs, I think, are a compelling case there for him, and I think that they'll be a major factor throughout this. So those would probably be the 2 guys I would point to. The reality of it is, though, the way I'm looking at it, Georgia is sitting here, with 17 commitments. Notre Dame has 20. Ohio State with 19 at this point. They're sitting just behind Notre Dame, nipping at the heels of them in terms of the score, the average rating for these guys. So, Georgia, you don't have 5 stars, right? But you're getting some of the nation's best 4 stars consistently. And that's really helped to boost their stock and kept them, high in the team rankings. Now, I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think that, does this have the potential to be the number 1 class? Probably. I wouldn't pick it to be right now in this moment, but, top 3, top 5, I think that's probably a pretty solid bet at this point. Be shocking to see it otherwise, especially with some of the meat left on the bone out there.
You mentioned Caleb Downs earlier, and I got the notification on Instagram that Justice Haynes was broadcasting live on his Instagram from the commitment. So if there was any doubt, I think that kind of gave it away, because Justice Haynes doesn't even go to the same high school as Caleb Downs. So if he's there, you got to figure that, before the commitment even happened, that the odds were in Bama's favor. But since Haynes made his decision to go to Bama, have you had any more time to reflect on, what happened there, why, this Georgia legacy doesn't go to Georgia, or at this point, is the decision just, it is what it is for Justice Haynes?
I think it's an is what it is, man. I'm not going to lie to you, and I don't get this way very often anymore. Normally we've got pretty good intel on these things leading up to it. I think that one shocked everybody. I don't think that there were many people that had a great pulse on that. It changed. It felt like within 24 hours of that thing that it started moving that way. I mean, there were hints of it along the way, but I think everybody was convinced that this was going to be Georgia's race to lose throughout for any number of reasons. Pickett, running back legacy, a guy who, grew up in Athens essentially, took more visits to Georgia than he probably did anywhere else. Great relationship with Dell McGee. It was a stunner, man. And, I think it was a big loss for Georgia. I wrote that in a column that happened right after the commitment. There's not a lot of way to spin it, because in my mind, Justice Haynes was option 1A on the board, and you felt pretty good about that. Now moving forward at running back, you've got some question marks. I think that Richard Young is going to see his stock continue to soar on Georgia's board. He's a real priority for them throughout this, but even more so important now. Jeremiah Love's a guy I would watch out for. Jeremiah Cobb, an Auburn commit, is another name that you'll probably want to monitor. Right now, I think it has the feel of maybe going toward the transfer portal and looking there as well. It's just hard for me to project a name there. And in my mock class, I went back and revised the running back position, and I said I think transfer is the route. It won't surprise me if they get a 2023 guy, but I would be, just kind of throwing darts if I gave you a name right now as to who I thought that would be.
Yeah, and this is just total speculation, but if I'm, imagining Bama negatively recruiting against Georgia at that position, they do have Branson Robinson, who is going viral in, Nick Chubb type fashion right now, just based on his photos of his physique, like Nick Chubb did when, he was still, between high school and college. Same thing's going on with Branson Robinson right now, because he looks like he's cut from a block of granite. And Andrew Paul as well. If I'm Bama, I'm looking at that, I'm saying, you really think you're going to, even crack that rotation? And you also have the factor of, maybe he's a kid that just wanted to carve his own path. That's just total speculation on my part, but I can see why it would happen. But all that said, it still surprised me too. Last thing for you before I let you go, Palmer and I spoke last week, basically right after Kirby Smart got his contract. How much do those things impact and affect recruits? Do they care about that? Do they look into that as, a sign of stability, or is that more overblown than the reality would suggest?
I do think that there's an appeal there. I mean, it provides some solidity. It provides a kind of a clearer vision of the future. But, I think more so kids are interested in their positional coaches. I mean, you're going to spend time with Kirby Smart, but if you're a running back, you're going to be spending a lot more time with Dell McGee and Scott Sinclair as well. So it's your positional coach and those weight room guys that I so often hear kids mention. Head coaches are impactful, but they're CEOs of the company, and you're working with your manager most of the time. So I think that it helps. Certainly it's a lot better than the alternative, and wondering what the future holds. I mean, God bless Brian Harsin. I don't know how he's selling anything at this moment, but I think it's a tough. I think it would be a much tougher hill to climb if you didn't have that in place. Georgia not going to have to worry about that for a long, long time at this point.
All right, Jake, what you got going on over at DawgsHQ.com as we head into the weekend now with a lot of big visitors on campus once again for the Dogs?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting weekend, I think, for Georgia. We weren't quite sure how it was going to shape up for them. There are a lot of opportunities for a lot of guys to see a lot of campuses. And so, it's starting to slowly come together. Ellis Robinson will be back on campus. That's one of the top 10 players in America for the 2024 class, and a kid who's proclaimed Georgia his leader in the past. Alabama may have an edge there at the moment, but you got to think that getting him back on campus will be a big help to Georgia as well. So make sure to get over to DawgsHQ. I'll have a list of the guys that we're expecting to see there, and have you covered on all the things recruiting this weekend for sure.
Cool. Yeah, definitely don't miss that. Every weekend in Athens is a good one. Jake, I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you soon, my man.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
All right, on to current team news. Appreciate Jake's insight on the recruiting trail. Now let's check in with Palmer Toms, DawgsHQ's Georgia beat writer. Palmer, we are locked and loaded, ready for camp in Athens. We just found out that August 4th on Thursday will be our day to talk to the team. We just spoke with Kirby and a few players, obviously, at SEC Media Days. But let's focus to real football and look ahead to that. What are your most circled storylines or players or things that you can't wait to see unfold between now and Georgia kicking off against Oregon?
Yeah, I think that there's several position battles to watch here as fall camp unfolds. Quarterback folks are going to want to see how those backups are coming along, but I don't think that that's necessarily a position battle. I think that's Stetson Bennett's job to lose, and it's that he's not going to lose it with anything he does in fall camp. To me, though, I do think it's going to be interesting to see, looking at the offensive line, the guys that are going to be protecting Stetson, or whoever's behind center. Those two guard spots are certainly ones that I'm watching. I think Warren Erickson being included on several of these preseason All-American, All-SEC, watch list type things certainly raises an eyebrow for me because, I think that he has to win his job still. There's no certainty that he's going to be a starter for Georgia on that offensive line. Started 14 of 15 games last year, all 14 after Tate Ratledge got hurt in the season opener. Warren Erickson was pretty much Georgia's right guard last season, with the exception of the one drive that Ratledge started and played against Clemson before being hurt. But as we mentioned, Tate Ratledge, I think that's somebody that you got to watch in that guard competition. He's obviously coming back off of his injury. Kirby said that that's going to take some time, but I do think that that is something worth watching because I think that he won that spot for a reason last year, and he can make a push there. The other two guys, there's two guard spots open, and four guys really competing for those two spots because I think guys are pretty interchangeable on which side they can play. Devin Willock and Xavier Truss are the other two that I would watch. My gut feeling, it would be that Willock and Ratledge are probably going to be on the sidelines to start the game against Oregon on September 3rd, and that it's going to be Erickson and Truss starting for Georgia. I think that those are probably the two most veteran options, the two most experienced, proven options. Truss came in and played in place of Erickson some last season, has started a big game against Cincinnati that started that one at left tackle back in 2020. He's got experience. He's proven. He's a big option. And then Warren Erickson is just a reliable guy. So that's one position battle I'm watching on offense. flip things over to defense, there's numerous that you could watch there between inside linebacker, guys on the defensive line having to step up, second cornerback, second safety, you name it, there's probably a position battle, and that's just what's going to happen when you're losing 7 starters and 8 major contributors on that side of the ball.
Yeah, the preseason list cracked me up just because I always like to go back and look at the list from last season and see, who made it and who didn't. Obviously you can't predict a guy like Brock Bowers. Some people did. I remember David Pollock talking about Brock Bowers being a huge contributor before that Clemson game with Darnell and, Georgia's injury issues at tight end last season. And lo and behold, Brock Bowers becomes the SEC Freshman of the Year. But save, unicorns like that, there's always going to be, your easy-to-predict players, and there's going to be ones that we never see coming. I mean, I look at Trayvon Walker last year. He becomes the number 1 overall draft pick in the NFL, and I think he's a second or third teamer in the preseason rankings from a lot of all SEC teams. So it's kind of a crapshoot, but there is somewhat of a basis to look at. But when you think about guys that aren't getting that love, aren't getting that recognition, do you have your eyes on anyone that is flying under the radar, but by the end of the season, they are on an all-SEC team, whether it's first or second or third?
Yeah, I go back to the offensive line, and submitting my all-SEC ballot last week, I was very surprised that Broderick Jones was not an option, at one of those offensive line spots. He's certainly somebody that folks are high on. He's shown up on a lot of these preseason all SEC magazine type deals, the Pro Football Focuses of the world, but wasn't an option for us media members to vote on after SEC Media Days. So that's somebody that could surprise. And then I think somebody like Warren McClendon is somebody that I was surprised that was not on the watch list for the Outland Trophy, but was named an all-SEC player. You kind of got, one guy that was named all-SEC but not on the Outland Trophy in McClendon, and one guy that was on the Outland Trophy watch list but not possible to be named all-SEC. I thought those two offensive tackles for Georgia certainly could raise some havoc this season. I think on the defensive side of the football, I was surprised to see Jamon Dumas-Johnson on the Butkus Award watch list. I think that's just a testament to what Glenn Schumann has done with Georgia's linebackers and the faith that everybody has in that position. This is a kid that played a good bit last season, but not in major minutes. More in mop-up duty than major minutes. And when he was in, he impressed, but wasn't going against the first team offense, or wasn't going against the best competition. So I think he is going to have one heck of a season. Just put up a story over on DawgsHQ about Nolan Smith talking about some of those defensive stars that could be up and coming, and he named Jamon Pop Dumas-Johnson, as one of those guys. Going to be a leader. I talked about quarterback of the defense in a mailbag this summer, and somebody asked me who I thought the quarterback of the defense was going to be. There were kind of 2 guys that I named, and it was Christopher Smith, who is receiving a lot of this recognition, who is receiving the praise that he deserves. But I think Jamon Dumas-Johnson is going to have to be in that kind of role as one of the inside linebackers that's going about replacing a trio of guys that were taken in the first 3 rounds, but most notably replacing the guy that was Georgia's heart and soul of that defense. The vocal leader. Just turn on the tape from the national championship game, Nakobe Dean. Jamon did not show up on an all-SEC list, did show up on a Butkus Award watch list. That was a little bit surprising, but maybe to the national eye, saying, who is this kid, whatever. I think that people see that Georgia name associated with a linebacker and just assume that he's going to be pretty good. I agree here, but I was surprised to see him, not knowing that he hasn't played all that much. I was surprised to see him on a Butkus Award list. And then on the defensive line, I think guys like Zion Logue, Nazir Stackhouse, some of those guys are getting overshadowed a little bit by Jalen Carter. It can't be a one-man show for them up front. And so some of them, the guy that I probably circle the most to be a breakout player would be Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins. Again, I go back to what Nolan Smith said. He pointed Ty Ingram-Dawkins out as a breakout player. So, he's somebody that Georgia has, like you mentioned Trayvon Walker here just a few moments ago. Georgia has to replace the number 1 overall draft pick at defensive end, and I think Ingram Dawkins is going to be one of the guys that could do that the best.
Over at DawgsHQ.com, you have a premium series going on, and definitely encourage y'all to check that out if you aren't already. Got a 7-day free trial over at DawgsHQ.com. for our premium subscription info and columns, recruiting intel. But Palmer's working on a 22 for 22, the most important 22 players for Georgia in the 2022 season. What have you learned since we spoke last at SEC Media Days, whether it's something you've discovered working on 22 for 22 or something that you've listen back to from SEC Media Days coverage? What are, one or two things that have really jumped off the page at you as you prepare for Georgia to start its 2022 season?
Yeah, Wes, I think there's a lot that has jumped off the page from the 22 for 22 series. It's always interesting to go take a look at the entirety of Georgia's roster and try and figure out who some of those guys that are going to be super important are. We're at number 3 today, went up today as we record this on Wednesday. Number 2 and number 1 will finish out the week here. Number 3 was Stetson Bennett, who was certainly a topic of discussion at SEC Media Days. So there's a way to tie in both of the questions that you kind of asked there. I think Stetson is going to be important for multiple reasons. I think, first of all, he is the person that directs this offense. He's very comfortable in that role. He has established a comfort with both the coaches and the receivers. I think everybody trusts him now, more so than they did probably this time last year, because you look at it, and I'm writing this for a story later this week. You look at it, Stetson Bennett's past. At this time on the calendar, mid-July, late July, as you make the turn into fall camp, Stetson Bennett has never been better than a backup. And that came in 2019 when he was a backup to Jake Fromm just because Georgia didn't have any other options. Justin Fields had left for Ohio State. Dwan Mathis was on the mend from a brain cyst surgery that happened in May. They did not bring Stetson Bennett in probably planning to have him as a backup. He was probably more of a third-string emergency quarterback option, and he didn't play all that. He wasn't asked to play all that much during that 2019 season. But I remember he came in during the SEC championship game. I think Jake Fromm had gone down for a third down or something, and maybe a helmet popped off or something. But yeah, Stetson came
was
in
not ready for that moment.
and was not ready for that moment. I think that is something that can only be learned with experience. You look at what Stetson brings to the table, and he is one of the most experienced quarterbacks, not only in the SEC, but in the country. Having had starting experience in 2020, in 2021, playing in big games. Georgia is comfortable with what they have in Stetson Bennett. I don't have him number 2 or number 1 on my most important players because you could make the case that Georgia gets to where they got to last season without Stetson. I probably wouldn't try and make that case, but I think that you could. I've seen a message board thread over on the Dog Walk message board, and people are asking if JT Daniels had been Georgia's starter, do they win the national championship? There's certainly a lot of back and forth there. But there's a world where Stetson never sees the field last season, and Georgia has that same kind of success. So I think he's incredibly important. Bronze isn't too bad, but I don't think that he is Georgia's most important player. I'm not going to give that away on here. There's certainly two options that stand out from the rest. Jalen Carter and Brock Bowers are going to be those top two players. I'm not going to give it away in which order, though. I'll bring you all back to the site there. But certainly been a fun series. The position preview series has also been great. And looking forward to wrapping both those up this week and turning the page to fall camp.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how those top two shake out. Appreciate it, Palmer. For our YouTube viewers, we'll wrap up here. We have other videos from Tim Tebow, Andy Staples, DJ Shockley on our YouTube page. Those will be on the audio-only version of this show right after this quick break, so stay tuned for those guys as we discuss the Dogs from SEC Media Days and hear their thoughts on the upcoming season. YouTube listeners, thanks for watching. We'll catch you next week. Audio only. Catch you in a couple minutes.